Sometimes the cruelest prisons aren't made of bars, but of broken promises, locked doors, and the silence of those who were supposed to love you. Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Mira's life had been nothing but an endless cycle of pain, suffering, and cruelty. From the moment her father passed away, leaving her at the mercy of her wicked stepmother and equally heartless step-siblings, who treated her not as family but as an unwanted servant, she was forced to bear the weight of their every demand while being robbed of the love and security she once knew in her father's presence. At just 26, she had never truly lived, only survived, existing in a house that once held warm memories, but had since turned into her personal prison, where she was forced to cook, clean, and endure relentless humiliation without a single moment of respite from the break of dawn. Her day began with the piercing voice of her stepmother, Lorraine, who would storm into her tiny, windowless basement storage room, kicking over the thin, ragged blanket she used to cover herself at night, and yanking her up by the arm, barking orders as if she were nothing more than a lifeless object to command, a mere tool to serve their needs. "Lazy girl! Do you think this house will clean itself?" Lorraine would sneer, her voice laced with disdain, eyes burning with an inexplicable hatred, as though Mira's very existence was an offense. "Get up and make breakfast before I throw you out onto the streets where you belong." The threats no longer fazed Mira, because she knew they were empty. Lorraine would never truly throw her out, not because she cared, but because she enjoyed having someone to torment, someone to crush beneath her feet whenever she pleased. And so, without protest, without allowing herself the luxury of dreaming of rebellion, Mira would drag her weary body from the cold floor, forcing her legs to move despite the hunger gnawing at her stomach, the fatigue that never left her bones, and the heaviness of a heart that had long since been shattered beyond repair. Once the family was seated at the grand dining table, laughing and chatting as they indulged in the feast she had painstakingly prepared, Mira would stand silently in the background, stomach rumbling in protest, forced to watch them eat while knowing that, once again, there would be nothing left for her. Her stepbrother, Damon, took particular pleasure in tormenting her, often calling her over just to make her believe he was about to give her a piece of food before shoving it into his mouth with a smirk, laughing as she swallowed her pride and turned away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her pain. "Oh, poor Mira," her stepsister Talia would mock with a condescending pout. "If only you weren't so useless, maybe someone would actually care about you." The words stung, not because they were true, but because Mira had once foolishly believed that if she tried hard enough, if she was obedient and kind, they would love her. That maybe, just maybe, they would see her worth and treat her as family. But years of cruelty had long since shattered that hope, replacing it with a cold realization that, to them, she would never be anything more than an inconvenience, a punching bag for their frustrations, a presence they tolerated only because she was useful. And yet, despite everything, despite the suffering, despite the injustice, Mira refused to let them break her completely. Deep within her heart, buried beneath the scars of years of abuse, she held on to the tiniest sliver of hope that one day, somehow, she would escape this nightmare. That she would find a place where she was not merely tolerated, but truly wanted, truly loved. At night, as she lay curled up on the cold, hard floor of the cramped storage room they called her bedroom, that fragile hope was all that kept her breathing. She would stare at the cracked ceiling, imagining a different life. A life where she was free, where she could walk without fear, smile without restraint, love without hesitation. But reality was unforgiving, and each morning she was reminded that she was still trapped in this cruel existence, still bound to a fate that seemed inescapable. The bruises on her arms, the calluses on her hands, the empty ache in her stomach, all reminders that she was nothing more than a servant in her own home, a prisoner in a place where she should have been cherished. Even as she scrubbed the floors until her hands bled, even as she endured the sting of Lorraine's harsh words, even as she watched Damon and Talia flaunt the luxuries that should have rightfully been hers, Mira refused to let the darkness consume her completely. She would endure, she would survive. Because she knew, no matter how hopeless things seemed, her story was not meant to end in suffering. There had to be more waiting for her, beyond these walls, beyond this pain, beyond this cruel, unloving house. But when and how would her escape come? For now, all she could do was wait and endure, praying that someday, somehow, her life would finally change. That night was colder than usual. The chilling wind howled through the cracks of the old Portland mansion Mira had long called home. But it wasn't the biting cold that sent shivers down her spine. It was the strange, unsettling silence that had settled over the house, an eerie quiet that made her stomach twist with an unexplainable sense of dread. She had learned long ago that peace in this house was often a warning, a sign of something sinister lurking just beneath the surface. And as she scrubbed the kitchen floor, her fingers numb from exhaustion, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. It wasn't long before her fears were confirmed. The sound of heels clicking against the marble floor made her freeze. When she turned her head, she found herself face to face with Lorraine, whose expression was more smug than usual. Her painted lips curved into a smile that sent a wave of nausea through Mira's already weak body. "Get up," Lorraine commanded, her voice cold, eyes gleaming with something dark, something Mira couldn't quite place. She hesitated for only a second before obeying, rising to her feet, wiping her damp hands on the ragged dress she wore, heart hammering violently against her rib cage as she waited for whatever cruel punishment Lorraine had planned this time. But nothing could have prepared her for the words that followed. "Pack your things," Lorraine said, amusement lacing her tone. "You're leaving." The words didn't make sense at first. Leaving? That couldn't be possible. Mira had nowhere to go, no one waiting for her beyond the confines of this house. The only escape she had ever dared to dream of was one she could create for herself, not one Lorraine would willingly grant. "What?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, fear coiling in her gut. Lorraine clicked her tongue in irritation before stepping closer, gripping Mira's chin with sharp, manicured nails, forcing her to look up. "Don't make me repeat myself, girl," she sneered. "You should be grateful. I finally found someone willing to take you off my hands. Do you have any idea how worthless you are? No man in their right mind would ever want a pathetic little servant like you. But lucky for you, someone does." The pit in Mira's stomach deepened, her mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had she been sold into servitude elsewhere? Was she being cast out into the streets to fend for herself? But before she could voice her concerns, a knock echoed through the house, sharp and authoritative, making her blood run cold. Lorraine smirked, releasing Mira's face as she turned toward the door, her movements unhurried, almost leisurely, as if she were about to welcome an esteemed guest rather than seal her stepdaughter's fate. Mira wanted to run, wanted to scream, but her legs felt like they had been filled with lead, her body frozen in place as the heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing a man whose mere presence sucked the air from the room. Damien Blackwood. The name alone was enough to send fear through anyone who had ever heard of him. And Mira had heard plenty. He was a man of power, wealth, and ruthlessness, a billionaire whose name carried both respect and terror. A man whose business empire was built on the broken backs of those foolish enough to cross him. He was cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy. And now, somehow, for some unimaginable reason, he was here for her. Damien stood tall, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his tailored black suit a stark contrast against the dim lighting of the mansion. His sharp, chiseled features were unreadable as his icy gaze landed on Mira. His presence alone was suffocating, an unshakable force that demanded attention, that commanded obedience without a single word. Lorraine greeted him with a sickeningly sweet smile, the kind she reserved for wealthy men who could serve her interests. "Mr. Blackwood," she purred, stepping aside. "Everything is ready." Mira barely had time to process what was happening before two of Damien's men entered the house, towering figures dressed in black, their expressions void of emotion as they moved toward her with the efficiency of men who had done this countless times before. Panic surged through her veins, her body finally responding as she stumbled backward, heart slamming against her ribs as reality set in. She had been sold like property, like an object to be traded for wealth. "No," she gasped, shaking her head in disbelief. "You can't do this." But her protests only seemed to amuse Lorraine, who merely laughed, crossing her arms as she watched the scene unfold with evident satisfaction. "Oh, but I can," she mused. "Do you really think you had a choice, Mira? You belonged to me, and now you belong to Mr. Blackwood." The words sent a violent shudder through Mira's body. Her stepmother had never seen her as family, but to hear her say it so blatantly to confirm what Mira had long suspected was like a dagger straight to the heart. She turned to Damien, desperation in her eyes, hoping, praying, that there was some sort of mistake, that he would change his mind, that he would see her as nothing more than a burden and walk away. But Damien's expression remained impassive, unreadable, as if her suffering was nothing more than an inconvenience, an afterthought. "We're leaving," he stated, his voice deep, authoritative, leaving no room for argument, and just like that, her fate was sealed. The two men reached for her, their grips firm but not cruel, though it didn't matter. She thrashed against them, struggling with every ounce of strength. She had tears spilling down her cheeks as she pleaded, begged, but it was useless. "Please," she sobbed. "I don't want to go." Lorraine merely watched, unimpressed, rolling her eyes at Mira's desperation. "Enough of this nonsense," she snapped. "You should be thanking me. Do you have any idea how much money Mr. Blackwood paid for you? You're finally worth something." The humiliation, the betrayal, the sheer helplessness of it all crushed Mira's spirit. But she had no time to dwell on it before she was being dragged toward the door, her mind screaming for an escape that didn't exist. As she was pulled past the threshold, the last thing she saw was Lorraine's smug face, Damon and Talia standing behind her with amused expressions, not a single trace of remorse in their eyes. And then the door slammed shut behind her, severing her from the only life she had ever known, no matter how cruel it had been. The night air was frigid. The sleek black car waiting at the curb reflected the dim glow of the streetlights, its presence looming like a final nail in the coffin of her freedom. Damien walked ahead, unconcerned, his movements effortless as he slid into the back seat, not once looking back at the girl who had just been torn from her home against her will. The men forced her forward, opening the car door before pushing her inside. The scent of leather and power overwhelmed her senses as she landed on the seat opposite the billionaire who now owned her. The doors shut, the locks clicked into place, and as the car pulled away from the house, from everything she had ever known, Mira realized with a horrifying certainty, her life was no longer her own. The car ride was silent, the hum of the engine the only sound filling the air. But inside, the tension was thick, suffocating, stretching across the space between Mira and Damien like an invisible thread waiting to snap. Mira sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap, her entire body trembling. From the events of the night, from the overwhelming realization that she was no longer free, that she had been taken away from her home, not that it had ever truly been a home, to belong to a man she had never met before. A man whose reputation alone sent fear coursing through her veins. But as terrified as she was, she refused to break. Refused to let Lorraine win by cowering in fear. Instead, she kept her gaze down, refusing to meet the eyes of the man who had just purchased her like a possession. But Damien was watching her. No, not just watching, studying her, analyzing her with the precision of a man who was rarely surprised by anything in life. And yet here he was, completely stunned, utterly thrown off by the sight of the woman sitting across from him. He had expected just another woman, another desperate soul looking for an escape, another beauty who had been used and discarded by the world. But Mira was none of those things. She was breathtaking, ethereal, an angel sitting in his car, wrapped in a dress that barely fit her frame, her smooth brown skin glowing under the dim light, her full lips pressed together in defiance, her dark, innocent eyes filled with a pain so deep, so raw, it made something inside him shift. Something unfamiliar, something dangerous. He had met countless women, had been surrounded by beauty all his life, but none had ever captivated him like this. None had ever made his breath hitch the way she just had. He leaned back against the leather seat, his piercing gaze never leaving her, his mind racing with questions, with an unexplainable need to know everything about her. to understand why she looked at the world with such guarded sorrow, why she carried herself like someone who had been broken too many times but refused to fall apart. And then, as he continued to watch her, his sharp eyes picking up on every small detail, the way her fingers trembled ever so slightly, the way she flinched when the car hit a small bump, the way she refused to meet his gaze, he noticed something that made his entire body still. Purity. Innocence. A kind of untouched fragility that didn't belong in this world, especially not in his world. His chest tightened, his jaw clenching as realization sank in, as the weight of what he had just acquired settled in his mind. She was a virgin, at 25. The shock of it sent an unfamiliar jolt through him, a strange mix of emotions he wasn't used to feeling. He had seen it all, had been with women who knew how to play the game, who knew what men like him wanted. But Mira? She was untouched, untainted by the sins of the world. And that realization alone made something dark and possessive stir deep within him. His fingers tapped against his knee, his mind calculating, wondering if she had been hiding it, if she had been saving herself for someone, if she had been protecting herself from the cruelty of men, or if the cruelty she had endured had simply never allowed her the chance to know love, to know intimacy, to know the kind of passion he had given so many others. His curiosity deepened, his need to know more growing with every passing second. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice smooth yet firm, carrying the weight of authority that few dared to challenge. Mira stiffened but didn't obey, her eyes remaining locked on her lap, her body tense as if preparing for whatever cruelty he was about to unleash. Damien narrowed his eyes, the sharpness of her defiance intriguing him. Most women fell to their knees the second he spoke, desperate to please, desperate to be in his presence. But she was different, and he wanted to know why. "I said, look at me?" This time his voice was lower, rougher, carrying a dangerous edge that sent a shiver down Mira's spine. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her gaze, her dark eyes finally meeting his. And in that moment, Damien felt something shift, something irreversible. Up close, she was even more stunning than he had realized. Her eyes held secrets, held pain, held a story he suddenly needed to hear. "Tell me," he murmured, his gaze never wavering, "who did this to you?" Mira frowned, confusion flickering across her delicate features. "Did what?" Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried weight, carried strength beneath the fear. Damien tilted his head, his sharp blue eyes searching hers, reading her like an open book. "Who took everything from you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. Mira's breath hitched, her fingers clenching the fabric of her dress as emotions she had buried for years threatened to surface. No one had ever asked her that before. No one had ever cared to. For years, she had been invisible, a shadow in her own life, a servant in her own home. She had endured every insult, every slap, every cruel word, and yet she had never once been asked about her pain. Never once had she been given a moment to breathe, to speak, to be heard. And now, here was the most powerful man in the country, a man who could have anything, anyone, sitting across from her, demanding to know her story. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, her heart pounding. "My stepmother," she finally whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue, "and my step-siblings." Damien's expression darkened, his jaw tightening, his fingers flexing against his knee. He had suspected as much, but hearing it from her lips, seeing the way her body reacted to the mere mention of them, ignited something dangerous inside him. He hated cruelty, hated the idea of a woman being mistreated, being used, being discarded. And now, knowing that this angel, this untouched beauty, had suffered at the hands of the very people who should have protected her, made his blood boil. "Tell me everything," he demanded, his voice like steel. Mira hesitated. Her instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to keep her pain to herself, to never let anyone close enough to see her scars. But as she looked into Damien's eyes, as she saw the intensity there, the silent promise that he wouldn't let this go, she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't being ignored. She was being seen. And so, with a shaky breath, she told him. She told him about the night spent scrubbing floors until her fingers bled, about the days spent hungry because Lorraine refused to feed her, about the insults, the punishments, the isolation, the constant reminder that she was unwanted, unloved, undeserving of kindness. She told him about the stolen dreams, the sleepless nights, the desperate prayers whispered into the darkness. And as she spoke, Damien listened, not out of pity, not out of curiosity, but out of something far deeper, something far more dangerous. Because as she poured her soul out to him, as she laid bare every wound, every scar, every heartbreak, Damien Blackwood, the man known for his cold heart and ruthless ways, made a decision. Mira was his now, and he was never letting her go. The moment Mira's lips parted to speak, it felt as if time itself had frozen. The weight of years of suffering, of pain buried so deep it had nearly become a part of her, finally pushed its way to the surface, and she could no longer hold it back. Sitting across from Damien, in the dimly lit luxury of his mansion, she felt small, insignificant. Yet for the first time in her life, she felt like someone wanted to hear her. Like someone actually cared about the story that had been locked away inside her fragile heart. Her voice trembled as she spoke, her hands clenching the fabric of her dress, her nails digging into her palms as if to anchor herself, as if to stop herself from breaking apart entirely. "It started when my father died," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. But to Damien, it was the loudest sound in the world. His sharp, piercing gaze never wavered from her, his entire body frozen in silent fury as he listened, as he absorbed every single word, every single detail of the nightmare she had endured. "I was just a little girl," she continued, her eyes dark pools of sorrow, her beautiful brown skin glowing under the golden light, a stark contrast to the pain she was reliving. "He was my whole world. He loved me more than anything. He used to tell me I was his little princess," she whispered. "He always told me he would protect me." Her voice hitched, the memory too raw, too painful, and for a moment she struggled to breathe, struggled to continue. Damien clenched his fists. His jaw tightened, his entire being radiated fury, but he stayed silent, letting her continue at her own pace, knowing that this was the first time she had ever been given the chance to speak her truth. "After he died," she continued, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill, "everything changed. Lorraine, she didn't even pretend to care anymore. It was as if the moment he was gone, I stopped existing as a person. She didn't even let me grieve. The very next day, she took everything, everything that belonged to my father, everything he had ever given me, everything that reminded me of him. She sold his things, threw away his pictures, erased him from the house as if he had never even lived there. And then she turned to me and said, 'You are nothing in this house. You have nothing. You are nothing.' And from that day on, she made sure I never forgot it." A single tear slipped down Mira's cheek, but she didn't bother to wipe it away. She had spent too many years swallowing her pain, pretending she was strong enough to carry it alone. But now, in the presence of the most powerful man in the country, a man who could destroy lives with a single command, she let herself be vulnerable. Let herself finally say the words she had buried so deep. "At first, it was just small things," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She would make me clean the house, cook for her and Damon and Talia. I thought, maybe if I worked hard enough, maybe if I proved I was useful, she would let me stay. She would at least let me live. But I was wrong. Nothing I did was ever enough. If I didn't clean fast enough, I was punished. If I didn't cook perfectly, I was punished. If I even breathed the wrong way, I was punished. And when she got tired of punishing me herself, she let Damon and Talia do it." Mira choked on the words, the memories flashing before her eyes like a never-ending nightmare. "They would laugh at me, call me names, push me, hit me, humiliate me. They would spill food on the floor on purpose, just to watch me get on my hands and knees to clean it up. They would take my clothes, my shoes, my books, anything that was mine, anything that gave me even the smallest bit of comfort. They took it away. And when I cried, they would say I was weak, that I was pathetic, that no one would ever love someone like me." The pain in her voice was unbearable, like shattered glass cutting through the air, and Damien felt something inside him snap. His hands curled into tight fists, his nails digging into his palms so hard he nearly drew blood. His entire body trembled with uncontainable rage. He wanted to kill them, all of them. Every single person who had ever laid a hand on her, every single person who had ever made her feel worthless. He wanted to erase them from existence. to make them suffer 1,000 times over for every tear she had shed, for every moment of pain they had inflicted on her. But he stayed silent, forcing himself to listen, forcing himself to let her speak, because he knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was about her, about the years of suffering she had endured alone. And right now she needed to be heard more than anything. "I tried to leave once," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible, her body trembling as she relived the moment that had nearly broken her completely. "I thought if I could just get away, if I could just run far enough, maybe I could have a life of my own. So one night when they were asleep, I packed a small bag, took whatever little money I had saved from doing chores for the neighbors, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, as far as I could. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just wanted to be free." She let out a bitter laugh, one filled with so much pain it made Damien's chest ache. "But I was stupid. I thought I was fast, but they were faster. They found me before I even made it out of town. Lorraine was waiting for me when they dragged me back home. She didn't say a word, she just smiled, and then she took everything from me. She locked me in the basement for 3 days. No food, no water, no light, just darkness, just silence, just nothing." Mira closed her eyes as if trying to push away the memory, as if trying to erase the horror of those days from her mind. But it was impossible. It was burned into her soul, a scar that would never fade. The silence she spoke of wasn't just around her. It had crawled into her chest, coiled in her throat, until she no longer remembered what her own voice sounded like. For 3 days, she had listened to the sound of her own heart breaking, each beat slower, softer, as though even it had given up. "When she finally let me out," she continued, her voice hollow, empty, "she told me, 'You are mine. You will never escape me. No one will ever save you. No one will ever love you. You are nothing.'" Each word had carved itself into her like a blade, sharp, deliberate, unforgiving. Mira remembered the chill of the basement floor against her skin, remembered the taste of blood from biting her own lip just to stay sane, remembered the way her mind had started to believe that maybe Lorraine was right. A heavy silence filled the room, the weight of her words settling like a storm between them. And then, slowly, she lifted her gaze. Her dark, pain-filled eyes met Damien's. "For years," she whispered, "I believed her." Damien couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could do was stare at the woman in front of him, the woman who had been through hell and still managed to survive. The woman who had been broken 1,000 times, but still found the strength to keep going. And in that moment, he made a silent vow. He would protect her. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to do. She was his now, and no one would ever hurt her again. The moment Damien Blackwood made that vow, the entire world seemed to shift beneath Mira's feet, as if the very foundation of her existence had cracked open to reveal something entirely new. Something she had never dared to dream of. Hope. His voice was deep, steady, filled with a force that sent shivers down her spine, not from fear but from something else, something unfamiliar yet intoxicating. For years she had lived in a world where cruelty was the only language spoken to her, where love was a myth, where kindness was a fleeting illusion that disappeared the moment she reached for it. But here he was, the most powerful, ruthless billionaire in the country. A man feared by many, standing before her, making a vow that shook her very soul. "I will punish them for every tear they made you shed, and from now on, you will live like a princess, Mira." The words echoed in her mind over and over, as if she couldn't quite believe them, as if her heart refused to accept that someone, anyone, would ever fight for her, would ever care enough to want to erase the suffering she had endured. Her lips parted, but no words came out. What could she even say? How could she respond to something so impossible, so beyond anything she had ever imagined? Her hands trembled at her sides, her body still raw from the torment she had endured for years. Her soul still chained to the horrors of her past. Was this real? Could she trust it? Could she trust him? Her entire life she had been taught that she was nothing, that she was worthless, that no one would ever love her. No one would ever protect her. And yet, Damien stood there, his dark, stormy eyes locked onto hers, his entire presence radiating something dangerous, something unyielding, something that whispered of a promise that could not be broken. He was not a man who made empty threats. He was not a man who spoke without meaning every word. And that terrified her, because if he truly meant it, if he truly intended to avenge her, to give her the life she had only dreamed of in the quiet darkness of her nights, then everything she had ever known would change. Why? The question slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Her voice barely a whisper, yet it carried all the weight of her shattered heart. All the doubt, all the fear, all the wounds that had been carved into her soul by the hands of those who were supposed to love her. Why would you do that? For me? Damien's expression didn't waver. If anything, his gaze darkened, his entire being hardening, as if her question itself had ignited something deep within him, something fierce, something unbreakable. He took a step closer, his towering frame overwhelming, yet not suffocating, his presence powerful, yet not oppressive. Because no one, he said, his voice low, firm, filled with undeniable certainty, no one will ever hurt what belongs to me. The breath caught in her throat, belongs to me. The words sent a shockwave through her body, her heart slamming against her ribs, her mind spiraling into chaos. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Did he mean, "You are mine"? Now, Mira, he continued, his voice like a vow, an unshakable declaration that left no room for argument, I protect what's mine. She had never belonged to anyone before. Not in a way that meant safety, not in a way that meant care. She had only ever been an object, a burden, a shadow that existed in the background of other people's lives. But the way he said it, the way he claimed her, was different. It wasn't a prison, it wasn't a trap, it was a shield, a promise, a force of nature that nothing could break. Her breath trembled as she looked up at him, searching his face for deception, for cruelty, for anything that would tell her this was just another trick, another game, another way to break her. But she found nothing. Only steel, only certainty. Only a man who had already decided that she was his to protect, his to cherish, his to fight for. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Damien said, softer this time, his hand reaching out, hesitant for the first time, as if he was waiting for her permission. No one had ever waited for her permission before. No one had ever treated her as if her choice mattered. The realization made her throat tighten, made her eyes burn, made her entire body tremble with something she couldn't name. Slowly, cautiously, she let him touch her. His fingers brushed against hers, warm, firm, grounding. A gasp escaped her lips at the simple contact because it wasn't just a touch, it was an anchor, pulling her away from the darkness, pulling her into something new, something terrifying, something that felt like hope. I will make them pay, Damien said, his voice filled with a fury so intense it sent a shiver down her spine. Every single one of them. They will regret every moment they made you suffer. They will beg for mercy, and I will give them none. And you, Mira, you will never shed another tear for them. You will never feel pain at their hands again. From this moment on, your life is mine to protect, and I will make sure you never suffer again. Her heart ached, not from pain, not from fear, but from something so overwhelming, so consuming, that she didn't know how to contain it. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her like this, like she was worth fighting for, like she was worth something. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were something else, something foreign, something that felt dangerously close to relief. You mean it? She whispered, barely able to believe it, barely able to process the weight of what he was offering. Yes, Damien said without hesitation, without doubt. I swear it, Mira. You are mine now, and no one will ever hurt you again. The walls she had built around her heart trembled. The chains that had bound her for so long cracked, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. That night, as the world outside faded into silence, Damien did not rush, did not demand, did not claim her like a ruthless man taking possession of something he had bought. No. He was different. He was careful, tender, as if he knew she had spent her entire life being hurt, as if he understood that every touch she had ever known had been cruel, unkind, and meant to break her. Mira had prepared herself for anything, had expected coldness, force, or indifference, because that was what life had taught her to expect. But when Damien reached for her, his touch was something else entirely. It was warm, steady, and filled with something she couldn't quite name. His fingers brushed against her cheek, slow, deliberate, tracing the delicate curve of her face, as if memorizing her, as if trying to make her understand that he saw her, truly saw her, not as an object, not as something disposable, but as a person, as someone worthy of tenderness. She trembled beneath his gaze, her body tense, her mind screaming at her to guard herself, to prepare for pain. But Damien did not move any closer, did not demand anything. He simply looked at her. His dark, piercing eyes were filled with something raw, something that made her heart pound in her chest. "You don't have to be afraid," Damien murmured, his voice low, soothing, as if trying to erase every painful memory that had been carved into her soul. "I will never hurt you, Mira. Not now, not ever." The words sent a shiver through her, not because she didn't believe him, but because she wanted to believe him too much, and that terrified her. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever given her a choice. She had spent her entire life in the shadows, treated as nothing more than a burden, a servant, something to be used and discarded. But Damien was different. He did not touch her with entitlement. He did not look at her like she was something he had bought. He looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like he would rather die than let her be hurt again. Her throat tightened, her hands gripping the soft fabric of the sheets beneath her as she fought against the overwhelming emotions rising inside her. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes searching his for answers. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Damien exhaled slowly, his thumb brushing against her cheek with unbearable gentleness. His touch sent warmth spreading through her body. "Because you deserve kindness," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "You've spent your life in pain, in fear, thinking that no one would ever love you. But that ends tonight. From today, you are mine, and I will cherish you forever." The words sent a shockwave through her, shaking her to her very core. Because no one had ever claimed her in such a way. Not with force, not with cruelty, but with devotion, with a promise that sounded unbreakable. She had never belonged to anyone before, not in a way that meant protection, safety, love. But the way he said it, the way he held her, as if she was something delicate, something he would fight the entire world to protect, made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see the man beneath the title. Beneath the ruthless billionaire the world feared. He was strong, powerful, dangerous. But with her, he was something else, gentle, patient, willing to wait for her to trust him, to believe in the promise he had just made. And that scared her. Because if he was telling the truth, if he truly meant what he said, then everything she had ever known would change. For the first time in her life, she had a choice. And for the first time, she chose to trust. Her hands trembled as she reached up, hesitantly, uncertainly, until her fingers brushed against his chest, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart beneath her touch. Damien stilled, his breath catching slightly, as if her touch meant more to him than she could ever understand. "Mira," he murmured, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything. Just let me hold you." She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat nearly unbearable. But she nodded, barely able to find her voice. "Okay." It was just one word. But it was everything. Damien didn't hesitate. He moved slowly, carefully, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her against his chest, holding her close as if shielding her from the entire world. His warmth surrounded her. His scent, clean, masculine, intoxicating, filled her senses, making her feel safe in a way she had never known. And for the first time in her life, she felt something she had never dared to hope for. She felt loved. Her body relaxed against his, her head resting against his chest as his arms tightened around her, as if he could hold her together, piece by broken piece. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His actions said everything. He was here. He was real. And he wasn't going anywhere. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with something unspoken. Something powerful. Something that wrapped around them like a shield, against the past, against the pain, against everything that had ever tried to break her. Mira closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the warmth of his embrace, allowing herself to believe that, maybe, just maybe, she was no longer alone. "Sleep," he whispered against her hair, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "You're safe now, and for the first time in years..." Mira believed it. She let herself rest. Let herself trust. Let herself hope. Because Damien had promised to cherish her. And deep in her heart, she knew he would keep that promise. The next morning, as the golden sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the luxurious silk sheets wrapped around her, Mira slowly stirred, her body sinking into the softest mattress she had ever felt. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Her mind still trapped in the memories of the small, cold, uncomfortable bed she had always been forced to sleep in back at Lorraine's house, where every morning greeted her with the harsh reality of servitude. But as her lashes fluttered open, revealing the breathtaking sight before her, she gasped, her heart pounding as she sat up in shock. The bedroom was unlike anything she had ever seen, let alone imagined belonging to her. The walls were adorned with elegant gold and ivory accents, shimmering under the sunlight, and a massive crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, reflecting dazzling rays of light across the room like tiny dancing stars. The bed itself was fit for royalty, an enormous king-sized masterpiece, draped in plush embroidered bedding, the softest fabric caressing her skin. To her right, an entire wall of glass windows overlooked a breathtaking view of a private garden, lush with vibrant flowers and a sparkling fountain at its center, as if taken straight from a fairy tale. But what truly left her breathless was what awaited her beyond the bed. At the foot of the luxurious mattress, an array of exquisite dresses was neatly displayed, gowns of the finest silk, satin, and chiffon in every shade imaginable, their delicate embellishments glistening under the light. Beside them, perfectly arranged on a velvet-covered table, lay dazzling diamond necklaces, golden bracelets, sapphire-studded rings, and accessories so breathtakingly beautiful. They looked like they belonged to a queen. Mira's lips parted in disbelief as she slowly swung her legs over the edge of the bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush, soft carpet below. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch one of the gowns, a deep red off-the-shoulder masterpiece adorned with intricate beading that shimmered like a river of rubies. Never in her life had she dared to dream of such luxury. He wanted to erase them from existence, to make them suffer 1,000 times over for every tear she had shed, for every moment of pain they had inflicted on her. But he stayed silent, forcing himself to listen, forcing himself to let her speak, because he knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was about her, about the years of suffering she had endured alone. And right now, she needed to be heard more than anything. "I tried to leave once," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible, her body trembling as she relived the moment that had nearly broken her completely. "I thought if I could just get away, if I could just run far enough, maybe I could have a life of my own. So one night when they were asleep, I packed a small bag, took whatever little money I had saved from doing chores for the neighbors, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, as far as I could. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just wanted to be free." She let out a bitter laugh, one filled with so much pain it made Damien's chest ache. "But I was stupid. I thought I was fast, but they were faster. They found me before I even made it out of town. Lorraine was waiting for me when they dragged me back home. She didn't say a word. She just smiled. And then she took everything from me. She locked me in the basement for 3 days. No food, no water, no light, just darkness, just silence, just nothing." Mira closed her eyes as if trying to push away the memory, as if trying to erase the horror of those days from her mind. But it was impossible. It was burned into her soul, a scar that would never fade. The silence she spoke of wasn't just around her. It had crawled into her chest, coiled in her throat, until she no longer remembered what her own voice sounded like. For 3 days, she had listened to the sound of her own heart breaking, each beat slower, softer, as though even it had given up. "When she finally let me out," she continued, her voice hollow, empty, "she told me, 'You are mine. You will never escape me. No one will ever save you. No one will ever love you. You are nothing.'" Each word had carved itself into her like a blade, sharp, deliberate, unforgiving. Mira remembered the chill of the basement floor against her skin, remembered the taste of blood from biting her own lip just to stay sane, remembered the way her mind had started to believe that maybe Lorraine was right. A heavy silence filled the room, the weight of her words settling like a storm between them. And then slowly, she lifted her gaze. Her dark, pain-filled eyes met Damien's. "For years," she whispered, "I believed her." Damien couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could do was stare at the woman in front of him, the woman who had been through hell and still managed to survive. The woman who had been broken 1,000 times, but still found the strength to keep going. And in that moment, he made a silent vow. He would protect her. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to do, she was his now. And no one would ever hurt her again. The moment Damien Blackwood made that vow, the entire world seemed to shift beneath Mira's feet, as if the very foundation of her existence had cracked open to reveal something entirely new. Something she had never dared to dream of. Hope. His voice was deep, steady, filled with a force that sent shivers down her spine, not from fear but from something else. Something unfamiliar, yet intoxicating. For years she had lived in a world, "You are mine, and I will make sure you live like the queen you were always meant to be." Mira's chest ached with emotions too vast to contain. Gratitude, disbelief, and an unfamiliar yet intoxicating feeling of being cherished. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just existing, she was living. And as she stood there, staring at the paradise that was now hers, she realized one undeniable truth. Damien had not just given her luxury. He had given her freedom. He had given her a new life. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had given her the chance to finally believe in love. As the days turned into weeks, Mira found herself experiencing a life she had never known before. One filled with warmth, care, and a sense of security so foreign to her, she often wondered if it was all just a fleeting dream. She had spent years believing that love was nothing more than a cruel illusion, something meant for others, but never for her. And yet here she was, living in a world that felt like a fairy tale, all because of Damien Blackwood. The man once known for his ruthless nature, but who, in her presence, was nothing short of tender, protective, and endlessly giving. Every morning she awoke in the vast, silk-laden bed of her luxurious estate, her heart racing at the realization that she was no longer bound by suffering. Instead of being jolted awake by Lorraine's cruel demands or the harsh reality of servitude, she was greeted by the gentle warmth of the golden morning sun filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, by the scent of fresh roses that Damien had ordered to be placed in her room every night, and by the undeniable feeling of being cherished in a way she never had been before. There were mornings when she would lie still, her fingers gripping the edge of the silk sheets, afraid to move, as if any sudden gesture would shatter the illusion. Her eyes would trace the ornate ceiling, blinking away the disbelief that this space, this safety, was truly hers. She wasn't dreaming. She wasn't back in that cold storage room. This was real. Damien was real. Yet in the quiet between breaths, there were moments, a flicker here, a shadow there, when Mira felt a twinge of guilt she couldn't name. How could someone like her deserve this much happiness, this kind of love? She had spent so long being treated as less than nothing, the concept of being adored felt foreign, almost forbidden. She never said it aloud, but sometimes, when Damien wasn't looking, she would catch her reflection and whisper, "Why me?" But it was not the wealth or the luxury that began to stir her heart. It was Damien himself. The way he looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The way he listened to her every word with such intense focus, as if nothing else mattered. And the way his touch, no matter how light, no matter how fleeting, left a trail of warmth on her skin that sent shivers down her spine. At first, she had tried to guard her heart, reminding herself that men like Damien Blackwood didn't fall in love, that she was nothing more than an unexpected twist in his life, a possession he had acquired. She had watched him from the corners of her gaze, testing the truth in his every gesture, waiting for the moment he would grow cold, disinterested, waiting for the rejection she was sure would come. Slowly, hesitantly, she found herself trusting him. It was not an easy journey. Years of pain and cruelty had built walls around her heart, walls that had protected her from disappointment, from betrayal. But Damien was relentless, patient, unwavering in his pursuit of her trust. He never forced her, never demanded anything from her, except for one thing, that she allow herself to be happy. And so she did. She allowed herself to smile more, to laugh without fear of being silenced, to explore the world he had given her without the constant weight of anxiety pressing down on her shoulders. She allowed herself to look at him, not as the feared billionaire everyone else saw, but as the man who had saved her. The man who had given her a life of dignity, the man whose very presence made her feel something she had never felt before. Love. But with love came fear. A deep, paralyzing fear that threatened to consume her every time she let herself imagine a future by his side. What if this was temporary? What if he changed his mind? What if she was nothing more than a passing fascination to him, a momentary distraction in his otherwise power-driven world? She knew men like Damian Blackwood were not meant to be tied down by emotions, that they lived their lives on their own terms, unattached and unburdened by things like love. And yet, every time she looked into his deep, piercing eyes, she saw something there. Something raw, something real, something that made her heart race with hope. She tried to fight it, tried to remind herself that she was just a woman who had been thrust into his life by chance. But the truth was undeniable. She was falling for him. Hard. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every tender touch pushed her further and further over the edge, and she was powerless to stop it. She had never known what it felt like to be loved, to be wanted, not just for what she could offer, but for who she was. And Damian, in his own quiet, unyielding way, was showing her a love she had never dared to dream of. But Mira had learned long ago that love could vanish as quickly as it came. There were nights she lay awake long after Damian had fallen asleep beside her, staring at the ceiling, silently begging the universe not to take this away. She wasn't afraid of Damian walking away because of anything he had done. She was afraid because she didn't know if she could survive losing him if he ever did. She would catch herself studying him, every gesture, every silence, wondering, is today the day he realizes I'm not enough? Is today the day he decides he's given me enough of his world? But the fear remained, lurking in the corners of her mind, whispering warnings of heartbreak, of abandonment, of the cruel reality that love was not meant for people like her. So even as her heart raced with every interaction, even as she found herself longing for his touch, even as she felt herself falling deeper into the abyss of love, she hesitated. Because if there was one thing she had learned in her life, it was that happiness was fragile. And love was the most dangerous thing of all. But Damian was making it impossible not to believe. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, a moment that Mira had never dared to imagine, a justice she had never expected to receive. But Damian Blackwood was a man who never broke his promises, especially when it came to the woman he had vowed to protect with his very soul. From the moment he had learned of the torment Mira had suffered at the hands of her cruel stepmother and wicked step-siblings, a fire of unrelenting vengeance had burned within him. He had sworn to himself that they would pay for every tear Mira had shed, for every night she had gone to bed cold and hungry, for every moment she had spent believing she was unworthy of love, of happiness, of a life beyond servitude. Damian was not a man who acted on impulse. He was calculated, strategic, and ruthless when necessary. And when it came to his enemies, especially those who had dared to hurt the woman he cherished, he made sure their downfall was absolute. The plan had been set in motion the very moment he had taken Mira into his home. He had gathered every piece of information about her wretched family, uncovering the full extent of their greed, corruption, and the countless skeletons they had so desperately tried to keep buried. With the immense power he wielded, Damian launched an all-out war against them. Beginning with their financial empire, the very foundation upon which they had built their false sense of superiority. He orchestrated their bankruptcy with a precision that left no room for escape. Every fraudulent deal they had ever made, every stolen asset, every underhanded scheme they had profited from, was laid bare for the world to see. The media feasted on the scandal, headlines exposing their crimes flashing across every major news outlet. Their names dragged through the mud until they became nothing more than a cautionary tale of greed and cruelty. But Damian was far from done. It wasn't enough to strip them of their wealth. They needed to feel the kind of suffering they had inflicted on Mira for years. He ensured that every single one of their so-called allies abandoned them, that every powerful connection they had once boasted about turned their backs in disgust, leaving them with no one to turn to. No lifeline to grasp. Their lavish home was seized, their bank accounts frozen, their businesses shut down overnight, leaving them in financial ruin, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And then came the final blow. Their social downfall. The same high society that had once looked down upon Mira now treated them like parasites, whispering in hushed tones about their disgrace, mocking them for the very poverty they had once condemned others for. Lorraine, once a woman who had basked in power and control, was reduced to a desperate, broken shell of herself, her once manicured hands trembling as she begged for mercy. Her pride shattered as she realized there was no one left to save her. Damon and Talia, who had spent their lives reigning in privilege, now found themselves struggling to afford even the basics. Their friends abandoned them as if they carried a contagious disease. But the cruelest twist of all was that Mira was now living a life they could only dream of, loved and cherished by a man who had the power to destroy them with a mere whisper. And he had done it all for her. When Mira learned of everything Damien had done, when she saw the lengths to which he had gone to ensure that those who had hurt her would never rise again, she was overwhelmed with emotions too vast to contain. No one, not a single person in her life, had ever fought for her before, had ever sought justice for the pain she had endured. She had spent so many years believing that she was alone in the world, that no one would ever stand by her side. And yet, here he was, a man who had every luxury at his disposal, every beautiful woman at his feet, choosing her, defending her, loving her. The realization struck her like lightning. Damien Blackwood, the feared billionaire, the man the world whispered about in awe and terror, had done all of this not out of duty, not out of obligation, but because he loved her. Because her pain was his pain, her suffering was his suffering, and he would burn the world down before he let anyone lay another hand on her. As she stood before him, her heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and undeniable love, Damien reached for her, his strong arms pulling her into his embrace, his voice low and fierce as he whispered, "No one will ever hurt you again, Mira, not while I'm alive." And in that moment, as she buried her face against his chest, as his warmth surrounded her like a shield against the darkness of her past, she knew this was love. True, unwavering, undeniable love. And she would never let it go. The night was unlike any other. A night woven from the fabric of dreams, where the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the velvety sky, and the ocean waves whispered secrets of love against the shore, carrying with them the melody of a future filled with passion, devotion, and eternal togetherness. Mira had no idea what Damien had planned, no clue why he had insisted on blindfolding her as they stepped onto his private jet. His deep, commanding voice murmured assurances in her ear that tonight would be unforgettable. Her heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation, her fingers trembling slightly as they clung to his strong arm, his presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume her. She had never known a love like this. A love that was fierce, yet tender. Protective, yet freeing. A love that had taken her from the depths of despair and raised her to heights she had never dared to dream of reaching. Damien Blackwood was a man who had redefined her existence, a man who had shown her that she was not just someone to be used and discarded, but someone to be cherished, adored, and worshipped as the queen of his world. And as the jet finally landed, as he carefully led her onto a boat with the blindfold still securely in place, she couldn't help but feel a sense of overwhelming gratitude, knowing that whatever awaited her on the other side of this journey would be nothing short of extraordinary. The scent of salt and exotic flowers filled the air, the sound of waves lapping gently against the shore growing louder, and then finally, Damien's voice, rich and filled with something deeper than she could place, murmured against her ear. "Open your eyes, my love." And when she did, her breath caught, her heart nearly stopping at the sheer beauty before her. A private island stretched out before them, untouched, pristine, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The sand was softer than silk beneath her feet, the air carrying the faintest scent of roses and jasmine. But what truly stole her breath was the sight ahead. A pathway lined with thousands upon thousands of candles, leading toward a stunningly set table beneath a canopy of fairy lights, where an exquisite candlelit dinner awaited. The soft strains of violin music played in the background, blending seamlessly with the sound of the ocean, creating an atmosphere so breathtakingly romantic that Mira felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She turned to Damien, her voice barely a whisper. This is for me?" The answer was in his eyes, in the way he looked at her, as if she were the only woman in the world, as if she were the very reason the stars existed. "Everything I do is for you, Mira," he said softly, taking her hands and leading her forward, guiding her down the candlelit path with a patience and reverence that made her heart swell with uncontainable love. Dinner was a dream, a feast fit for royalty. The finest delicacies prepared by world-class chefs, each dish more exquisite than the last. Each bite a testament to the lengths Damien would go to ensure her happiness. But despite the perfection of the evening, despite the beauty of the island and the luxury surrounding her, the real magic was in the way he looked at her. The way he reached across the table to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. The way his fingers lingered against her skin, as if he couldn't bear to be apart from her for even a second. And then, just as the last rays of sunlight dipped beneath the horizon, bathing the sky in hues of pink and gold, Damien stood, his movement slow, deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers as he walked around the table. And then, to her utter shock, he lowered himself onto one knee. A gasp escaped Mira's lips, her hands flying to her mouth, her entire body freezing as she watched him reach into his pocket and pull out a velvet box, flipping it open to reveal the most breathtaking diamond ring she had ever seen. Large, yet elegant. Dazzling, yet timeless, a reflection of the love they shared. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, her vision blurring with unshed tears. And then Damien's voice, steady, yet thick with emotion, broke through the haze. Every word a promise, every syllable a vow. "Mira," he began, "from the moment I met you, my life changed forever. You showed me a love I never knew I was capable of. A love so deep, so consuming that no longer can I imagine a future without you. You are my strength, my heart, my soul. I want to spend every single day proving to you how much you mean to me, cherishing you, protecting you, loving you with every breath in my body. So my love, my queen, will you marry me?" A sob escaped her lips, her entire body trembling as she stared at the man before her. This man who had once been a feared, untouchable billionaire, now kneeling before her with nothing but raw, unfiltered love in his eyes, offering her his heart, his future, his everything. And in that moment, there was no doubt, no hesitation, no fear, only love. Only the overwhelming certainty that this was where she belonged, in his arms, by his side, forever. "Yes," she choked out, her voice thick with tears, a watery smile breaking across her face as she fell to her knees, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, Damien, 1,000 times yes." The relief, the joy in his eyes as he slid the ring onto her finger was indescribable. And then, before she could even take another breath, his lips were on hers, claiming her in a kiss so deep, so passionate, so filled with unspoken promises it left her completely breathless. The world melted away. The ocean, the island, the sky, all of it fading into the background as they lost themselves in each other, in the love that bound them together in a way nothing and no one could ever break. And as the stars above bore witness to their love, as the waves carried their laughter into the night, Mira knew with every fiber of her being, this was just the beginning of their forever. The wedding was a breathtaking masterpiece, a celebration of love so grand, it felt as though the entire world had paused to witness the union of two souls destined to be together, a moment so pure and perfect that it seemed to exist outside of time itself. Bathed in golden light and the scent of roses that filled the air like a blessing from the heavens, Mira stood at the entrance of the grand cathedral. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the bouquet of delicate white orchids and crimson roses, each petal a silent witness to the emotions surging through her. She had never dreamed of a wedding like this, had never imagined herself stepping into a world of such opulence and beauty. But here she was, dressed in an ethereal gown of the finest silk and lace, its intricate embroidery shimmering under the glow of the crystal chandeliers. The veil cascaded down her back like a river of moonlight. Every step she took down the aisle felt surreal, each moment stretching into eternity as she moved closer and closer to the man who had changed her life. The man who had taken her from darkness and enveloped her in a world filled with love, passion, and unwavering devotion. Damien stood at the altar, his eyes locked onto hers. And in that gaze, she saw everything. The promise of forever. The depth of a love so consuming that it made her breath hitch. The silent vow that from this moment onward, she would never know loneliness. Never know pain. Never feel unloved again. He looked devastatingly handsome in his custom-tailored black tuxedo, his chiseled features softened by the raw emotion flickering in his deep, mesmerizing eyes. And as she finally reached him, as he took her hands in his, the warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine, a silent acknowledgement that she was now his, completely, irrevocably, eternally. The ceremony was a blur of whispered vows and stolen glances, of gentle smiles and the overwhelming rush of emotions that threatened to bring tears to her eyes. And when the priest finally declared them husband and wife, when Damien cupped her face and pressed his lips against hers in a kiss, so deep, so filled with passion and reverence, the entire cathedral erupted into applause, the sound mingling with the joyous melody of the grand orchestra playing in the background. The reception was a dream. A celebration so lavish it felt like something out of a storybook, with chandeliers dripping in golden light, tables adorned with the finest china and crystal, and a feast fit for royalty. But none of it mattered to Mira. Not when the only thing she could focus on was the man beside her. The way he never let go of her hand. The way his gaze burned into her, as if he were memorizing every detail of this night, every breath she took, every heartbeat they shared. Each glance he gave her felt like a promise, like a vow that reached beyond words. It was overwhelming, being loved so openly, so completely. Mira wasn't used to it, not to being seen, truly seen, as someone worthy of reverence. And then, as the night deepened and the guests slowly began to depart, Damien leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his voice a husky whisper that sent delicious shivers down her spine. "It's time for our first night as husband and wife, my love." Her heart pounded violently against her ribs as he led her away, his grip firm, yet gentle, his presence an intoxicating force that made her pulse race with anticipation. The honeymoon suite was nothing short of paradise. A sprawling penthouse adorned with flickering candles and trails of red rose petals leading to a massive king-sized bed. The air was thick with the heavy scent of jasmine, and the unmistakable electricity of what was about to happen. Mira barely had time to take it all in before Damien turned to her, his gaze darkening with an intensity that made her knees weaken. And then, in one smooth motion, he scooped her up into his arms, carrying her across the threshold with effortless ease. His lips curved into a smirk as he whispered, "You're mine now, Mrs. Blackwood." A blush spread across her cheeks at the possessiveness in his voice, at the way his fingers trailed down her arms, igniting fire wherever they touched. And as he set her down gently, his hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, molding her body against his, in a way that left no space between them. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" he murmured, his voice thick with desire, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her gown. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She had spent years believing her body was a burden, something to be hidden or used against her. But under Damien's gaze she felt treasured, worshipped, not for how she looked, but for who she was. And before she could respond, his lips captured hers in a searing kiss, one that stole her breath, one that spoke of hunger, of longing, of a love so consuming it left her utterly undone. The heat between them was undeniable. The air crackled with electricity, sending shivers down her spine, and as his hands moved to the delicate buttons of her dress, as he slowly, reverently undressed her, his eyes never leaving hers, she felt her heart swell with a love so deep it made her chest ache. There was no rush, no urgency, only pure, unadulterated worship. A night filled with whispered promises and gentle caresses, with the exploration of every inch of her skin under the golden candlelight. With soft moans and gasped names, with the rhythmic dance of their bodies coming together in the most intimate, the most sacred way. Every touch, every kiss, every sigh was a declaration of love, an unspoken vow that neither of them would ever let go. And as the night stretched on, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, their bodies and souls entwined in a way that left no doubt that they were now one, Mira realized that this was what true love felt like. Safe, passionate, eternal. As Damien pressed a final kiss to her temple, pulling her even closer against his chest, his voice was a soft murmur against her skin. "I love you, Mira, forever." And with her heart full, her soul at peace, she knew he meant every word. She whispered back, "Forever." Mira's life had transformed into something she never could have imagined, a reality so breathtakingly beautiful it felt like a dream she never wanted to wake up from. A fairy tale where she was no longer the helpless, broken girl who had suffered under the cruelty of her stepmother and step-siblings, but the cherished, adored, and deeply loved wife of the most powerful and devoted man in the country. Every morning she woke up in the warmth of Damien's strong embrace, his arms wrapped protectively around her, his deep, husky voice whispering words of love against her skin, making her heart flutter with the realization that she belonged to him, that she was finally in a place where she was treasured beyond measure. He took her on private jet trips to the most beautiful destinations in the world, from the romantic streets of Paris, where he kissed her under the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower, to the pristine beaches of the Maldives, where they walked hand in hand, the golden sunsets reflecting in their eyes as the waves gently kissed their feet. Their love grew deeper with every moment together. But more than the extravagant gifts, the luxurious vacations, and the endless surprises, it was the way Damien looked at her. The way he touched her, the way he made her feel, that truly made her realize how much her life had changed, how she had gone from being unwanted to being the center of someone's entire world. He worshipped her, adored her, and made it his mission to ensure that she never felt an ounce of sadness or loneliness again. When he was at work, he sent her sweet messages, voice notes filled with longing, his deep, commanding voice softened only for her, telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to hold her in his arms again. When he returned home, no matter how exhausting his day had been, his first priority was always her. Pulling her into his arms, kissing her breathless, whispering how much he loved her as if he needed her just as much as the air he breathed. They spent their nights wrapped up in each other, tangled in sheets, lost in passion so intense that it left them breathless. And in the quiet moments that followed, when she lay against his chest listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, she knew that she had finally found her forever. A love so deep, so unbreakable, that nothing could ever take it away. Damien never stopped proving his devotion, never stopped reminding her that she was his everything. He arranged charity events in her name, knowing how much she cared for those who were struggling, ensuring that no one would ever suffer the way she once had. He bought her a gallery, where she could pursue her passion for art, encouraging her to follow her dreams, to build an identity of her own beyond being his wife. Because to him, she was not just a woman he loved, she was his partner, his equal, his queen. Every anniversary, every special occasion was celebrated with grand gestures, private candlelit dinners under the stars, surprise serenades, love letters written in his own hand. And yet, even on the quiet, ordinary days, he found ways to make her feel special, bringing her breakfast in bed, running her warm baths after long days, holding her close and dancing with her in the living room when their favorite song played. It was in those moments, those little things, that she realized just how deeply he loved her. And still, sometimes, just sometimes, Mira would pause in the middle of that happiness, her breath catching in her throat, as if waiting for the silence before a storm, as if the universe might realize it had given her too much joy and come to take it back. It was irrational, she knew. But when you had spent years surviving instead of living, even peace could feel suspicious. She kept those thoughts hidden, buried behind smiles and laughter, but deep down, a part of her still feared waking up one day to find it all gone. And then came the most beautiful surprise of all. The day she discovered she was carrying their child. Her hands trembled as she held the test in her hands, tears filling her eyes as the reality sank in, an overwhelming wave of joy crashing over her. When she told Damien, he was speechless for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief. before a slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face. His arms lifted her off the ground as he spun her around, his laughter rich and filled with pure, unfiltered happiness. You've given me the greatest gift of all, my love," he whispered, pressing soft kisses all over her face, his hands resting gently on her stomach, as if he couldn't believe that their love had created a new life. From that moment on, Damien became even more protective, refusing to let her lift a finger, spoiling her even more, showering her with kisses, whispered promises, and tender moments that made her heart melt. He was there for every appointment, every craving, every moment of exhaustion, holding her, supporting her, making sure she never felt alone. And when the day finally came, when she held their baby in her arms for the first time, when she looked into Damien's teary eyes as he kissed her forehead, whispering how proud he was of her, how much he loved her, she knew this was the happiest moment of her life. From the ashes of pain and cruelty, she had risen into a life filled with nothing but love, joy, and the promise of forever. And as she looked at the man who had given her everything, at the family they had created together, she knew she would never need to dream again, because reality was already more beautiful than she had ever imagined. Mira's life had already felt like the most perfect fairy tale. But fate had one more beautiful surprise in store for her, one that would fill her world with even more love, more joy, and a happiness so profound it would bring her to tears. Months had passed since she had given birth to their first child, a little prince who had stolen Damien's heart from the very moment he entered the world. A baby boy who was the perfect blend of both his parents, carrying Mira's warm brown skin and Damien's striking features. A child so adored, Damien had practically put the world on hold just to be by his side. He had embraced fatherhood with a passion that left Mira in awe, waking up for midnight feedings, cradling their son in his arms as he whispered bedtime stories, pressing soft kisses to his tiny forehead, and promising to protect him for the rest of his life. Mira had thought that nothing could ever match the overwhelming joy of watching Damien become a father. But one morning, as she stood in the bathroom holding a pregnancy test with shaking hands, she realized their love story was about to take another breathtaking turn. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the test, at the undeniable proof that another miracle was growing inside her. A life created from the love she and Damien shared. A love so deep and unbreakable that it had once again blossomed into something extraordinary. Tears welled in her eyes, a soft, disbelieving smile spreading across her lips as she pressed a hand to her stomach. A rush of emotions flooded her soul. Joy, excitement, a touch of nervousness. But most of all, an all-consuming love for the tiny being now a part of her. She could hardly wait to tell Damien, to see the expression on his face, to watch the love of her life realize he was going to be a father again. Unable to contain her excitement, she rushed downstairs, her heart racing as she found Damien in his office, deep in thought as he reviewed business reports, his powerful presence as commanding as ever. But the moment she entered, his attention immediately shifted to her, his dark eyes softening as he took in the glow on her face. The way she looked as if she had just received the most wonderful news. "What is it, my love?" he asked gently. He asked, rising from his chair, concern flickering in his gaze as he stepped toward her. Mira took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for his, placing them gently over her stomach, her voice thick with emotion as she whispered, "Damien, I'm pregnant." For a moment there was silence. Damien's entire body froze, his eyes widening in shock as her words sank in, as the reality of what she had just told him settled into his heart. And then, in the next breath, a radiant, breathtaking smile broke across his face. A smile so full of love and joy that it made Mira's heart swell with happiness. "My love," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion as he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and twirling her around, his laughter rich and filled with pure elation. "You've given me the greatest gift again." His lips found hers in a passionate, joy-filled kiss, his hands cradling her face as if she were the most precious treasure in the world, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the woman who had turned his once cold life into a paradise of love and warmth. From that moment on, Damien became even more protective, refusing to let Mira lift a finger, showering her with love, devotion, and endless care. Every craving, every discomfort, every little ache, he was there, ready to do anything to make her pregnancy as smooth and joyful as possible. He massaged her feet when she was tired, cooked her favorite meals when she had cravings, ran warm baths filled with rose petals, and held her close every night, whispering sweet nothings against her skin, reminding her how much he loved her, how grateful he was for the life they were building together. But beneath Mira's joy was a quiet fear she hadn't voiced aloud. In the solitude of night, her hands would instinctively wrap around her belly, guarding it, as if afraid the happiness growing inside her could somehow be taken away. For someone who had known so much loss, the idea of being this fulfilled felt fragile, almost unreal. She would often wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, half expecting the dream to end. But every time she turned and saw Damien sleeping beside her, one arm wrapped around her protectively, she would breathe again, slowly, deeply, reminding herself, this is real, this is mine. And when the time finally came, when Mira went into labor, Damien was right there by her side, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement, his eyes filled with love and awe as he watched her bring their children into the world. But the most shocking, most breathtaking surprise of all came when the doctor smiled at them and announced, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. You have twins, a boy and a girl." Mira gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks as she turned to Damien, seeing the purest, most unfiltered joy in his expression. The way his eyes shone with unshed tears, the way his entire body trembled with overwhelming happiness. "Twins," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder, as if he could hardly believe that fate had blessed them with not one but two perfect little miracles. And when the nurses placed their newborns in their arms, when Mira looked down at the tiny beautiful faces of their baby boy and baby girl, she knew this was the greatest moment of her life. Damien held their son, while Mira cradled their daughter, their gazes meeting over the heads of their precious children, love and gratitude shining in their eyes, as they silently thanked the universe for this incredible blessing. "I love you," Damien whispered, leaning in to press a tender kiss to Mira's lips, his heart swelling with emotions too powerful to put into words. "You have given me everything, my love. You are my greatest treasure." As Mira looked at her husband, at the life they had created together, at the family that had grown from the ashes of her painful past, she knew that she had finally found her forever, a love so pure and unbreakable that nothing in the world could ever take it away. And as their twins cooed softly in their arms, as Damien pressed a kiss to each tiny forehead, whispering promises of love and protection, she knew that her fairy tale was now her reality. Forever. Mira realized that her heart was fuller than it had ever been, overflowing with a happiness so immense that it left her breathless. This was her fairy tale, her happily ever after. And as she looked into the eyes of the man who had changed her life, she knew this was only the beginning of their beautiful forever. Mira's life had transformed into the most beautiful love story, a dream she had once believed was impossible. Yet here she was, living in a world where love, happiness, and devotion surrounded her in ways she had never imagined. The days of pain, suffering, and loneliness were nothing but distant memories, mere shadows that had faded beneath the overwhelming light of the love she now shared with Damien, the man who had not only saved her, but had worshipped her, adored her, given her a life where she was not just a wife or a mother, she was his entire universe. Every morning, she woke up wrapped in the warmth of his arms, feeling his breath against her skin as he held her close, unwilling to let her go, even in sleep. His love was fierce, possessive, consuming in a way that made her heart race, a love so deep that she knew, without a doubt, there was no force in the world that could ever come between them. She was no longer the girl who had once been abandoned, mistreated, and sold like she was nothing. She was now the woman Damien Blackwood cherished beyond reason. The woman he looked at as if she were the most priceless treasure in existence. The woman he had vowed to protect, love, and worship for all eternity. Their home was a paradise, a breathtaking mansion built with love, filled with warmth, laughter, and the pitter-patter of tiny feet as their beautiful twins filled every corner with joy. Their son, a miniature version of Damien with his deep, commanding eyes and strong presence. Even as a toddler, had already captured his father's heart in a way that made Mira smile every time she watched them together. And their daughter, the princess of their world, was the light of Damien's life. His little angel, whom he spoiled endlessly, treating her like royalty, ensuring she would never know a day of pain, never feel even a moment of sadness. Their love had only grown stronger with time, an unbreakable bond that even parenthood had not dulled. If anything, it had only intensified, making Damien even more devoted, more passionate, more desperate to show Mira just how much she meant to him. Their nights were filled with passion, stolen moments where he would pull her into his arms, his touch setting her skin on fire as he reminded her again and again that she was the love of his life, the only woman who had ever mattered to him. "You are mine, Mira," he would whisper, his voice thick with emotion as he traced his fingers along her jawline, his eyes dark with desire and love. "My heart, my soul, my everything." And she believed him, because in every touch, every kiss, every heated gaze, she felt the depth of his love. The undeniable truth that Damien Blackwood would never, could never love anyone the way he loved her. He had given her everything, a life of luxury, a home filled with warmth, a love so deep and unshakable it left her breathless. But most importantly, he had given her a family, a place where she truly belonged, where she was not just loved, but cherished beyond words. And as she sat in their garden one golden evening, watching their twins play while Damien sat beside her, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his gaze soft as he looked at her, she realized something that made her heart swell with indescribable emotion. She was finally home. She was no longer that broken girl who had once lived in fear, no longer the helpless soul who had believed she was unworthy of love. She was now a wife, a mother, and the most adored woman in the world. "What are you thinking about, my love?" Damien's deep, velvety voice pulled her from her thoughts, and she turned to him, her eyes shimmering with happiness as she smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude for this man, this love, this life she had been blessed with. "I'm thinking about how much I love you," she whispered, reaching up to gently cup his face, her thumb tracing the strong lines of his jaw, her soul overflowing with adoration for the man who had changed her world. Damien's expression softened, his lips curling into a tender smile as he leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead before murmuring against her skin, "And I love you more than you will ever know, Mira. More than words, more than life itself." She closed her eyes, savoring the warmth of his love, knowing with absolute certainty that this was her happily ever after. A life filled with love, passion, and the kind of devotion that would never fade. A love story that had started in pain, but had blossomed into something so breathtakingly beautiful, it felt like a dream. She remembered the cold silence of the basement, the sting of cruel words whispered in the dark, the emptiness of years spent trying to be invisible. And now, this warm sun on her face, the sound of her children's laughter in the breeze, and the steady rhythm of Damien's heart beneath her ear. She had crossed an ocean of pain to get here, and for the first time she didn't just feel safe, she felt worthy. But it wasn't a dream, it was real, it was hers. And as Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her close as their children's laughter filled the air, she knew one thing for certain: she was home, forever, in the arms of the man who had given her the world. Dear friend, there's a truth the Stoics often remind us of, that we cannot control what life gives us, only how we rise to meet it. Mira's journey wasn't marked by ease or luck, but by her quiet courage to endure, to hope, and to choose love over bitterness. Her story teaches us that even after walking through years of darkness, we are still worthy of light. We are not defined by what broke us, but by what we choose to become. So if you find yourself in your own chapter of pain, remember, healing is not only possible, it's yours to claim. And maybe, just maybe, your own forever begins the moment you stop surviving and start believing you deserve more. If this story moved your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life.